Countdown by Ben Mikaelsen. Chapter 2. Back in the United States, Elliot Schroeder finished his chores, keeping an eye on the calf he'd brought in. The calf stood on wobbly legs and bunted at its mother for milk. The barn door swung open, and in walked Elliot's father, Dalton. Looking at the man, it was easy to see where Elliot got his blonde hair. Dalton's weathered skin and lazy grin hid his age. His lips toyed with a stub of straw. "How's the calf doing?" he drawled. "Great," Elliot said. Dalton Schroeder grabbed a bridle for his bay gelding. "The wind's letting up. Let's head up to the tree line and look for old Crowleg. Fresh snow might be our ticket to finding that crafty old bugger." Elliot nodded. For years he and Dad had been after this one old bull elk. It had 7 points on each horn, and was the biggest and smartest elk in 3 counties. They called the bull Old Crowleg because one front hoof angled in from an accident, probably a hunter's bullet. Dalton saddled his horse, and soon he and Elliot rode toward treeline, their rifles tucked in leather scabbards. "These snows might bring old Crowleg down from the high country," Dalton commented, sitting tall in his saddle. Elliot heard his dad speak, but he was busy thinking. "You're sure quiet," Dalton said. "I swear, ever since you started flying lessons, your head has been somewhere else." "I'm not thinking of flying lessons. I'm thinking of blasting off into space. Tomorrow, NASA announces their first junior astronaut." Dalton laughed, reining his horse up a draw. "There isn't a mosquito's chance in a tornado of your winning that lottery. Give it up and get your head back to ranching." Elliot shook his head. "Even if I don't win, I still want to be a pilot someday and fly." "You're better off here on the ranch." "But Dad, I don't want a ranch. I want to—" "You think you're too good to ranch and get your hands dirty?" Dalton spit the stub of straw from his lips and spurred his horse up beside Elliot. "Son, 4 generations of Schroeders made this place what it is. Where's your pride? You don't just walk away from this like a Sunday picnic that's over. How many kids ever get a ride in country like this, looking for an elk like old Crowleg? He's special. You're special. This place is special." Elliot said nothing. This argument always ended the same way, but still, someday he wanted to do more than look at the sky and just dream of flying. He wanted to be a pilot. At treeline, Dalton motioned. "You hike in here. I'll ride ahead and work back." Elliot nodded and dismounted. He snubbed his horse to a tree, then walked into the woods with his rifle. Snow crunched under his steps. A squirrel raced along a deadfall, storing nuts for the winter. What Dad said about the ranch life was true, Elliot thought. You would never find old Crowleg in New York City, but you can never fly through the clouds sitting on a horse either. Among the trees, snow fell lightly. Elliot moved forward, angling up the slope. He picked each step. After a quarter mile, he leveled off and skirted the mountain, crossing each ravine cautiously. Ahead, a porcupine waddled into the underbrush. 2 white-tailed deer flagged their tails and bounded upslope. Instinctively, Elliot froze. They had not run from him. Long minutes passed. Finally, Elliot started forward. At that same moment, a branch cracked in the trees. Like a majestic ghost, a huge bull elk moved into the open at the bottom of the next draw. It was old Crowleg. The elk hobbled slightly. His nose jutted forward. His huge horns tipped gracefully back. Elliot stared at the proud and magnificent bull. Old Crowleg was probably moving away from Dad. As the bull approached, Elliot looked down at the rifle in his hands. Finally, he raised the rifle and aimed. He did not slip off the safety. Through the scope, the elk appeared even bigger. Each breath pumped from the bull's nostrils like steam from a dragon. Elliot moved the crosshairs back and forth across the massive body. He hesitated, then clicked the rifle safety off. He had seen old Crowleg during the last 5 years, dozens of times, sometimes in the high meadows, protecting his harem of cows, sometimes all alone in the thick deadfall. The bull always moved like a king. As Elliot carefully shifted positions, his knee snapped a twig. Crowleg's head turned, muscles twitching. Still, Elliot kept the rifle's crosshair centered on the proud and powerful chest. He rubbed the trigger, but did not pull. Finally, he lowered the rifle. Crowleg grunted at the movement and crashed into the thick brush. As quickly as he had appeared, he was gone. Elliot stared at the rifle in his hands. If Dad loved the ranch so much, and if old Crowleg made this place so special, why shoot the big elk? It didn't make sense. Elliot shook his head. He didn't dare talk to Dad about things like this. Elliot trudged back toward the tree line to get his horse. Dalton waited for him. "See anything?" he called as Elliot walked up. Elliot shook his head. "Nothing worth shooting." Vincent Oldtome arrived at his family's ingang before dark. In Maasailand, every family lived close together in small huts made from cattle dung and built in a circle around the corrals. Maasai, small huts were so low one had to crouch to enter. Vincent's father, Tome, lived in the largest round hut. His 3 wives each had their own. Vincent and his younger brothers lived together in another small hut. Nearby lived their grandparents. Across the ingang lived Vincent's many sisters. This night, the older sisters stacked more thorn tree branches around the corral. A lion had been prowling, stirring up the herds. Vincent quickly placed the calf with its mother and herded the cattle into the corral. When he finished, he grabbed 2 chunks of goat meat and left the ingang. Already the children filed into the small hut of Grandma Natana to hear stories. Spear and walking stick in hand, Vincent crossed the valley toward the far slope. All Maasai carried walking sticks, even the children. To not do so would let their arms swing like the white soldier. Vincent eyed the infirmary, standing brightly on the far hillside. The infirmary held magic. Sick people were made well. The Maasai doctor, Sambiki Okoye, had been trained in Nairobi. He wore the clothes of the white man. He owned many things. One black object, called a microscope, allowed Vincent to see things that were invisible. Also, Sambiki had what he called a generator. When it roared loudly, a round glass glowed brightly. This magic Sambiki called electricity. Most magical to Vincent was the black box that Sambiki spoke to. It was called a ham radio. Voices from all over the world spoke through the box to Sambiki. Vincent had learned English well at the wood school. Some English voices from the black box, however, sounded different and were hard to understand. Vincent loved visiting the infirmary each evening. He helped sweep and mop the hard floor. Sometimes he helped pour medicine into thin glass containers. Everything brought new questions, new smells, new sights, new magic. As Vincent approached the infirmary, he pulled his red-striped toga closer around his shoulders and idly pushed several fingers through the large hole in his lower ear. The holes had been cut when he was younger. With time, he had stretched them large to make himself handsome. At the top of each ear, a short colored peg was pushed through a smaller hole. This also made Maasai people very beautiful. Down the hill from the infirmary stood the wood school where Maasai children from many Ngangs learned new ways. They wore the white man's clothes, and many had no holes in their ears. The school filled Vincent with memories, with wanting, and with fear. They taught only in English, so when Vincent had gone, he struggled to learn the new language. The white headmaster frowned always, as if the look had dried on his face. He said the school was not there to teach the ways of the Maasai. Speaking the Maasai language, Ma, was not allowed in his school. Once Vincent did something forbidden by the headmaster. He tried to write in his own language, Ma, to see if ideas could be told this way also. For disobeying, Vincent was made to touch his forehead to the front desk while the headmaster caned him hard with a staff. Still, Vincent's mind stayed hungry for new ideas. This is why he visited the doctor, Sambike, this evening. When Vincent arrived at the infirmary, Sambike waved to him through the open door. "How is Dreamer Boy?" he called warmly. "You are late tonight." Vincent smiled shyly. "A cow waited to give birth so that I could carry her calf all the way to the Ngang. See, cows are not so dumb. If they are not so dumb, why do they need the Maasai to keep them from becoming lion food?" "A good riddle," Sambike said, motioning Vincent inside. Sambike's smooth black skin was not weathered and rough from being outside. Vincent entered the infirmary, bowing in respect to his elder. Sambike reached and touched Vincent's head gently, as was the way of the Maasai. "Did you come to see more magic?" he asked. Vincent nodded. "Then tonight I will disappoint you." "Why?" "Because nothing here is magic." Vincent frowned. "Everything here has been made by people." Sambike pointed to his head. "People using their minds. But I do not understand these strange things." Sambike laughed. "Ah, so if Vincent Old Tom does not understand, that makes it magic?" Vincent turned his head downward with embarrassment. "Look, Dreamer Boy." Sambike gestured about the small clinic. "What you see here was made by people like you." "Not like me," Vincent said more boldly. "I have not gone to school long enough. You have gone to the wood school for only 2 years. But always you have learned the ways of the Maasai. Wood schools do not teach the ways of the heart." He motioned. "This generator cannot teach honor. My equipment does not teach pride." Sambike lifted something from around his neck. "Can this stethoscope teach honesty?" "What is that?" Vincent asked. "Dreamer Boy, I think your stomach eats questions for food. Never have I found one with so many questions." Vincent smiled. "You say that one cannot ask too many questions." Sambike returned the smile. "That is true, but sometimes you must find your own answers." He took the stethoscope and carefully placed it over Vincent's ears. The other end he placed against his own chest. Wide-eyed, Vincent listened. Soon he heard a muffled beat like the galloping of a zebra. "That is the sound of my heart," Sambike said. "How do you know?" Sambike shook his head in feigned frustration. "Magic," he said, laughing. "There is no magic," Vincent said. "Ah, the young pup learns to bark." Sambike looked out the window at the darkening sky. "If you do not leave soon, you will share your walk home with the lions and hyenas." "I wish I did not have to leave," Vincent said quietly. Sambike opened the warped door without answering. Vincent nodded goodbye. "Thank you, Sambike," he said. Reluctantly, he headed back across the valley. The day had left no light in the sky when Vincent reached the Ngang. Carefully, he pulled back branches placed at the gate to keep lions from entering. The restless sounds of hungry cattle drifted with the air. From Grandma Natana's small hut came silence. Already the young ones slept. As Vincent placed the last branch back across the opening, his mother, Penena, came to him. She was not his birth mother, but she was wise, and often helped speak to Vincent's father when he grew angry. Speaking in their Maasai language of Ma, she said quietly, "Vincent, your father wishes to speak with you." Vincent knew already why he was being called, and he thumbed the